My name is Emily Carson. I'm 29 years old, and this is how I took revenge on the sister who humiliated me. Every time I picked up a spatula, it all started 5 years ago. At a Thanksgiving dinner I'd tried so hard to make special. I remember standing in the doorway of our family's dining room, heart pounding, holding the homemade pecan pie I'd spent all day perfecting. I placed it on the table with a proud smile, eager for approval, maybe even a rare compliment. Instead, my older sister Madison leaned in, took one bite, and laughed, loud and sharp. "This tastes like glue," she said, snorting into her wine glass. The room went still for a second before awkward chuckles rippled through the air. My mother didn't say much, just gently lifted the pie and set it aside. "Maybe next year, Em," she said kindly, like she always did. And just like that, the pride I'd built all day collapsed. I blinked hard, trying not to cry in front of everyone. But it wasn't just about the pie. Not really. It was about every moment like this. Every time I tried to show up, to contribute, to be seen. Madison had a way of crushing me that seemed so casual, so effortless. She had always been the golden one, the one with the flawless Instagram feed, the designer wardrobe, the college sweetheart husband. She was stylish, bold, magnetic. I was the awkward little sister who wore knockoff shoes and got tongue-tied at family gatherings. Madison never let me forget it. She'd roll her eyes at my clothes, mock my ideas, always with a smile that made it seem like a joke. But it never was. And that Thanksgiving, when she turned my pie into a punchline, something in me broke. I stopped cooking for anyone after that. I stopped trying, period. I let her voice echo louder than my own. Until I didn't. Asterisk. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside Chicago, the kind with trimmed hedges, cul-de-sacs, and the illusion of normal. But behind our beige siding, things cracked early. My dad left when I was 10. Just walked out one day and never came back. My mom, already stretched thin, started working 2 jobs to keep us afloat. That's when Madison stepped in. She was 3 years older, and overnight, she became a second parent. She packed my lunches, drove me to school, and made sure I did my homework. Everyone praised her for it. "You're so lucky to have a sister like that," they'd say. And I was, in some ways. But what they didn't see was how quickly care turned into control. Madison wasn't just helpful. She was dominant, charismatic, loud, and always the center of attention. Homecoming queen, varsity cheer captain, the kind of girl who knew how to turn her laugh into a weapon. She married a dentist straight out of college, posted pastel-filtered wedding photos, and never stopped being the golden girl. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, artsy, sensitive, the girl who cried during movies and spent her teenage years sketching cupcakes in the margins of her notebooks. Second best, second place. Sometimes I wondered if I was even visible next to her. Asterisk food became my escape. When the house was quiet, usually late at night, I'd sneak into the kitchen, pull out ingredients, and try recipes I'd scribbled in my journal. I watched cooking videos until my eyes burned, memorizing techniques, learning how spices worked like emotions. Bold, subtle, sometimes overwhelming. Cooking was the one place I felt free. No judgment, no competition, just heat, flavor, and the rhythm of creation. But even that wasn't safe from Madison. She'd catch me in the kitchen, sometimes, and smirk, still pretending to be a chef. "Ha," she'd say, tussling my hair like I was a child. Every time she saw me stir a sauce or whisk a batter, she'd find a way to make it small. A joke. A phase. Something cute I'd outgrow, now, at 29. I work the griddle at a rundown diner where the head chef throws pans when orders come in too fast. The pay barely covers my studio apartment. One room with thin walls, chipped linoleum, and a stovetop that only works half the time. But it's mine, and every night, no matter how brutal the shift, I go home and cook. I prop up my cracked phone on a shelf and film myself trying out recipes. I invent on the bus ride home. Korean BBQ tacos, lavender honey donuts, a truffle risotto that made me cry when I tasted it. Not because it was perfect, but because it felt like me, like something real, something that mattered. Madison doesn't know any of that. She's too busy living her curated life. All filtered brunches and #wife life captions on Instagram. Bottomless mimosas. Matching outfits. Beach selfies with her husband. Sometimes she calls. Small talk. Surface level check-ins. But there's always a jab. A little smirk through the phone. Still going through that cooking phase, she'll ask. Like I'm 12 again trying to make scrambled eggs. One night, after a 10-hour shift and another rent reminder blinking on my phone, I sat at my tiny kitchen table eating that truffle risotto. I looked around at the empty room, the dim light, the broken cabinet handle, and for once, I didn't feel ashamed. I felt fire. What if I didn't need her approval? What if I didn't need anyone's? What if the thing I loved, the thing she mocked, became the very thing that freed me from her shadow? That night, I made a decision. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. But I was going to rise. Not quietly. Not politely. I was going to do it in the one place she said I didn't belong. The kitchen. And she was going to watch. Madison invited me to her birthday dinner, a private room at a 5-star restaurant downtown. All candlelight and crystal stemware, the kind of place where even the water felt expensive. I didn't want to go. Every instinct in me said no. But some old reflex, maybe guilt, maybe hope, made me say yes. I spent the afternoon preparing her gift, pouring everything I had into something personal. A handmade spice blend, layered with warmth and smoke, and a small jar of homemade fig jam I'd spent hours perfecting. I wrapped it in a small wooden box, tied with a ribbon. It was thoughtful. It was real. It was the best I had to offer. I arrived that night in my best second-hand dress, trying to blend in with the designer heels and champagne laughter. The room was filled with polished people, old friends of Madison's, acquaintances from high school. Even my ex-boyfriend, Jake, who was now dating one of Madison's friends. Of course, I sank into the background, clutching the box like a lifeline. Eventually, Madison made her rounds, pausing when she got to me. "Oh wow," she said, untying the ribbon with mock delicacy. She opened the box, pulled out the jar and the spice tin, and raised her eyebrows like she'd found a dead mouse. Then she held it up for everyone to see. "Is this a prank or do I actually have to taste this?" she said, her voice sugar-sweet but slicing. Her friends burst out laughing. Even Jake smirked. I froze. I could feel every eye on me. The sting behind my eyes burned, but I didn't let a tear fall. I just smiled weakly and said nothing. Madison handed the box off to someone else like it was trash. I left before dessert. Walked home in the cold with the wind slapping my face. The city too loud, too bright, and somehow still unbearably lonely. On the way back, I passed a trash can and didn't even think. I threw the box in without looking back. That was the moment, the exact second I realized she wasn't going to stop. Madison would never stop humiliating me. Not unless I made her. Not unless I changed everything. The next morning, I walked into the diner and quit. No notice. No explanation. Just a clean break. The chef, predictably, laughed. Where you gonna go? Food Network. He jeered, flipping a half-burnt omelet. I looked at him. Grease-stained apron. Cracked fingernails. The same expression of disbelief I'd seen on Madison's face. And I felt something shift in me. It wasn't rage. It wasn't sadness. It was clarity. I don't know yet, I said calmly. But I'm not staying here. I walked out with no job, no savings, no backup plan. But I wasn't empty. I was done waiting for someone to give me permission. Done trying to earn approval from people who never intended to give it. I didn't know how yet, but I was going to become someone they couldn't ignore. Someone who didn't ask for a seat at the table. Someone who built her own. I had no money, no connections, just a battered notebook of recipes and a fire inside me that, for once, wasn't going out. I didn't need their validation anymore. I needed to become undeniable. After quitting the diner, I floated for a while, restless, anxious, but determined. The money I had wouldn't last long, so I scanned every job board, every flyer, until I found a posting taped to a broken window in an alley. Food truck help. Needed. Fast hands. No drama. It was parked behind a hardware store and looked half dead. The paint faded, the grill crusted with old grease. The owner, Carla, was in her 40s. Tough as nails, and one bad review away from shutting down. She hired me on the spot after watching me slice onions faster than her last 3 hires combined. The first few weeks were brutal. Early mornings, long shifts, Carla snapping from exhaustion. But I kept my head down and cooked. Then one night, after a particularly slow day, I asked her if I could try a new sandwich idea. She shrugged. As long as it doesn't cost me more than $5. I made a kimchi grilled cheese on sourdough, spiked with caramelized onions and garlic confit mayo. Carla took one bite and said, "Holy hell." We added it to the board. 2 days later, someone filmed themselves eating it, moaning dramatically between bites. The video blew up on TikTok. By the end of the week, there were lines wrapping around the block. News crews showed up. Carla cried in the supply closet. I kept working, up at 4 a.m. to prep sauces, chopping, grilling, scrubbing, taking orders. I didn't look up for weeks. Then Madison texted me. Heard your sandwich made the news. Nice hobby. Sis. Hobby. That word stung like a slap, but I didn't respond. I was too tired, too focused. Carla called me into the back one night and said, "You saved my life. Want part ownership?" I blinked, stunned. I said yes. I used the little I'd saved to invest. Not much, but enough to matter. And with Carla's blessing, I started sketching out a new dream. My own restaurant. I applied for a small business grant for women in the culinary arts, not expecting much. Weeks passed. Then, one morning on the train, my phone buzzed with an email. Congratulations. I reread it 5 times before the tears came. I didn't care that people were staring. I finally had something of my own. I found a rundown bistro. Space on the edge of the city. Leaking pipes. Peeling walls. A broken sign that still read Ricardo's. I bought it. I painted the walls myself. Warm shades of ember, and clay. I sketched every dish by hand in my journal. I wanted the place to feel like firelight, comforting, alive, unforgettable. I named it Ember. Opening night was quiet. A few friends, some regulars from the food truck. Carla beaming in the corner. Then, near closing, a woman walked in. Solo, elegant, a bit flustered. Her reservation at another place had fallen through. She asked for whatever I recommended. I served her roasted beet tartar, chili glazed duck, and a lemon olive oil cake I'd nearly scrapped 3 times. She ate slowly, thoughtfully. I had no idea who she was. The next morning, I woke to a dozen missed calls. A review had gone viral. A restaurant that wraps you in firelight. Chef Emily Carson has arrived. I sat in bed, stunned. My hands shook. I read the words over and over. I didn't even notice Madison's message until hours later. Wait, that Emily Carson is you? I stared at it, laughed softly, then typed, "Table for 2. I didn't expect a response. I didn't need one. 3 nights later, she showed up, with a friend. I saw her the moment she walked in, hair curled, designer coat. The same air of effortless confidence she'd always worn like armor. But her eyes flicked around nervously, like she wasn't sure if she belonged. I walked over, calm, collected, my apron tied neat. My head held high. Welcome to Ember, I said, smiling. She looked up at me like she didn't quite recognize the person standing in front of her. And maybe, in a way, she didn't. Madison walked into Ember like she owned it. Designer heels clicking against the polished floor. A familiar smirk playing on her lips. The restaurant buzzed with soft jazz and low conversation. Every table full. She glanced around, eyes skimming past staff, not recognizing me in my chef whites as I moved with quiet authority through the open kitchen, directing my team with a nod here, a word there. The host greeted her warmly, guided her to a table near the window. I watched from the back, through the grainy feed of the security camera. Heart steady. I had prepared something special. A tasting menu just for her. One that told a story she didn't even know she'd forgotten. She leaned in close to her friend, flipping her hair. She's my little sister, she said with a grin, clearly enjoying the attention. Cooking's her thing now. Cute, right? Her voice dripped, with false affection. The same tone she used to use when I'd bring her samples as a kid. Her friend nodded, sipping a cocktail. They didn't see the wait staff exchange knowing glances. Didn't notice the subtle tension in the air. The first course arrived. A miniature version of the grilled cheese that had made me viral. Now, served on brioche with fermented radish aioli. Madison took a bite, surprised. Maybe even impressed. Then came the second course, a delicate tomato consomme poured tableside, a play on the canned tomato soup we used to eat during snowstorms. She barely remembered those nights, but I did, me stirring the pot, her critiquing the salt. Third course, lavender roasted chicken with fingerling potatoes. The kind I used to try and replicate from cooking shows when I was 13. Her friend gushed. Madison played it cool. But it was the final course that made her stop. The dessert plate was placed in front of her with quiet reverence. A deconstructed pecan pie, buttery crust shards, smoked bourbon caramel, candied pecans, and a dollop of cream flaky sorbet. She blinked. Her hand hovered over the spoon. One bite, and she froze. Her eyes welled. She didn't speak, just stared at the plate as if it had reached into her chest and pulled something out. She didn't know was still buried. That was my cue. Asterisk I stepped out from the kitchen and walked toward her table. Calm, poised, each step deliberate. She looked up slowly, and I saw it. The moment of recognition. Her mouth opened slightly. She wasn't smiling anymore. Asterisk funny, I said. Voice quiet but steady. That's what I thought. 5 years ago. Asterisk her friend gasped, eyes darting between us. Wait, you're the chef. Asterisk I nodded, folding my hands in front of me. Yeah, and by the way, there's a wait list now. So, next time, book a month in advance. I let the words settle, then turned and walked away, my coat crisp. The kitchen door swinging behind me with a soft hush. Asterisk Madison didn't follow. She didn't say anything. She just sat there, in silence, the pie in front of her, finally tasting the bitterness of her own cruelty, and realizing how far I'd come without her. Asterisk. I didn't gloat. I didn't post about it. Didn't drop cryptic captions or subtweets. I just kept building. Ember became a quiet phenomenon. Not flashy, not loud, but steady and unforgettable. Word spread. Then came the mention, a brief, glowing nod in the Michelin guide that made my hands shake when I read it. The restaurant was fully booked for weeks. I was invited to speak at a women's leadership panel, seated next to chefs I'd admired since I was a teenager hiding in the kitchen with burnt cookies and big dreams. And when I stood on that stage, talking about perseverance and vision and what it means to carve space where none was given, I didn't think of Madison. I thought of the girl I used to be, the one who stayed up past midnight experimenting with cinnamon, whose heart shattered over a pecan pie, who just wanted to be seen. Asterisk one night, my mom came to Ember. She didn't say much, just sat in the corner during dinner service, hands folded, eyes wet with quiet pride as she watched me lead the kitchen like it was my home. After service, she hugged me longer than she ever had. She didn't need to say anything. I felt it all. Asterisk as Ember grew, I gave back. I opened the kitchen every Saturday night to underprivileged teens from local schools. We called it knife, skills, and noodles. We chopped onions, folded dumplings, talked about recipes and resilience. I saw pieces of myself in those kids. Wide-eyed, unsure, but hungry for something more. And every time one of them asked how I got here, I said the same thing. Start where you are, then keep going. Asterisk Madison texted sometimes, never with mockery, sometimes even with compliments, short, cautious, but real. That cake looked amazing. Love the new logo. And then one day, out of nowhere, she sent, I made your risotto. It wasn't great, but I get it now. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, that's the best part. You don't have to get it. I do. And I meant it. My confidence wasn't rooted in revenge anymore. It wasn't about proving anything to her or to anyone else. It was rooted in worth. In the hours I put in the bruises and burns and heartbreak that built something real. Asterisk I no longer needed Madison's approval. I didn't need her applause, her validation, or her understanding. I had built something she couldn't ignore. And more importantly, something I didn't need her to see in order for it to be real. I had become undeniable, not in spite of who I was, but because of it. Asterisk. The restaurant was quiet, the last candle flickering in its glass holder as Emily walked slowly through the dining room. The hum of the city outside had faded into a distant lull. She ran her fingers across the smooth wooden tables, polished by hundreds of hands and hours of care. Her eyes traced the stone tile along the floor, each piece one she laid herself. Knees sore and hands blistered, driven by a vision no one else had believed in. The soft aroma of rosemary and citrus still lingered in the air, a gentle echo of the night's final dish. She stepped into the kitchen, the place where everything had begun, where pain had turned into purpose. The counters gleamed. The knives were aligned in their places. The hum of refrigeration and faint scent of lemon cleaner pulsed like a heartbeat. Emily reached up and placed a small brass plaque above the kitchen door, one she had held onto for weeks, waiting for the right moment. For the girls they laughed at, and the women they now wait in line for. She stood back, letting the words settle into the space like they had always belonged. Then she walked to the prep station, opened the cooler, and pulled out a jar of chilled fig jam, the same recipe, unchanged, from that birthday night when it had been discarded without a second glance. She dipped a spoon into the jar, brought it to her lips, and smiled. It was rich, sweet, perfectly balanced. They said my food was trash. Now they beg for reservations. But this isn't revenge. This is the taste of freedom. The candle flickered one last time, and the screen cut to black. Asterisk.